Good afternoon or good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the November 28, AB 617 Portside Community Steering Committee meeting. We'll give it a few moments for folks from the public to trickle in.
Vamos a dar unos momentos para que gente del público puedan unirse a la reunión. Gracias por haber venido. Esa reunión del 28 de noviembre.
Perfect.
Hola, Chuy. Buenas tardes a todos.
Buenas tardes, Alicia. Great. Thank you, everybody. At this moment, we'll hand over the mic to one of our wonderful interpreters, Vicky, who will give instructions on how to access interpretation.
Okay. The interpreter will give the instructions first in Spanish and then English briefly. Buenas tardes a todos los que van a ocupar la interpretación simultánea al español. Si están utilizando su computadora portátil o de escritorio, favor de localizar el icono con figura de globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla cuando este aparezca en un minuto y luego pulsen en interpretación de lenguaje. Ahí dice Language Interpretation y seleccionen el idioma del español. Si se están sintonizándonos desde su teléfono, iPad o dispositivo similar, busquen el menú con los tres puntitos en la esquina superior del lado derecho de su pantalla y pulsen también interpretación de lenguaje y luego el español. Esto permite que escuchen a la traducción del español con un 80% de volumen y el audio en inglés se escuchará al fondo con un 20% de volumen. Tienen la opción de apagar el audio en inglés pulsando Mute Original Audio, ubicado en el mismo menú donde eligieron el idioma español. Gracias. For those of us those of you that are joining this meeting and English is your language unless you are completely fluent in Spanish, you will also want to choose either from your computer, laptop, or desktop the figure for globe interpretation at the bottom of your screen when it pops up in a minute, and choose the English channel so that anything said in Spanish will be interpreted onto the English channel. If you're connecting with your tablet, iPad, or cell phone, look for the three dots on the top right of your screen, click on that, and then language interpretation, and then also you would choose English. And that is the conclusion of the instructions, and now we'll wait for the channels to open. Vamos a esperar que se abren los canales ya.
Thank you so much, Vicky. The interpretation channels have now been launched. Ana, can you give me a heads up or let me know that the Spanish translation is coming through?
Sí, se oye.
Vicky, can you test out the audio, please?
Yes, it's working.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the next slide. Once again, we would like to welcome everybody. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday break last week. This is the last official meeting of this calendar year where all of the SERP implementation partner agencies will be presenting on their efforts this year so far with advancing the Portside Community Emissions Reduction Plan. At this moment, I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Ana to go over the meeting objectives as well as the rundown of the agenda.
Thanks, Chuy, and good evening, everyone. So as Chuy mentioned, today's objective, really, we will be hearing from the various partner agencies to receive an annual progress report on the Portside Community Emissions Reduction Plan, so the SERP. So we go to the next slide. So for today's agenda, after we go over roll call and some general updates, we will move to the approval of last month's meeting notes, as well as tonight's agenda. then followed with the presentations that we will be hearing from the various partner agencies on the SERP progress reports. So here in the agenda, you'll see the list of all the partner agencies who will be presenting today in this order. And then after every few presentations, we will be having a question and answer break for a short period, and then we'll go back to presentations and then and so forth. So we ask that you please just hold your questions for those Q&A breaks, and there will be various in between the presentations as well. And then after we go through all of the partner agencies presentations, we will just see if there's time for public comments and close out with closing remarks. And as a reminder, here are our meeting agreements. So first, create space for everyone to contribute. Step up, step back. Only one person speaking at a time. Listen to each other. Respect each other's opinions, knowledge, and perspective. Be conscious of time, and we also ask that you please speak slowly and clearly for our interpreters. So with that, we'll go ahead and move over to roll call. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. Keith? Let's see, Keith.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you. Is Shelby Busso also here?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, great, thank you, Steve. Jack?
Good evening, I'm here. Thank you.
Good evening, thank you. And is Massey here as well?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. Sarah let us know that she'll either be late or absent, so for right now we'll just list her as absent. Lydia?
Here.
Thank you, Lydia. Leslie?
Present.
Thank you. Tim?
Here.
Thank you. And is Mariela here as well?
Here.
Thank you. Nick?
Here.
Thank you, Nick. Martin? Let's see, Martin. David?
I'm here.
Thank you. Roman Partida Lopez? Let's see, Roman. Is Safia here?
I'm here.
Thank you. Dr. Stephanie Yoon?
I'm here. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Jose? Let's see, Jose. Diane?
I'm here.
Thank you. Samantha?
Good evening, I'm present.
Good evening. Thank you. Sergio?
Good evening, I'm present.
Good evening. Dinah?
Good evening, I'm here.
Thank you. And is Liana here as well?
No, she is not.
Okay. Filomena? Janice?
Present here.
Thank you, Janice. John? John. Hillary? Alicia?
Presente.
Gracias. Margarita?
Presente.
Gracias.
Presente.
Gracias. Noemi? Vanessa?
I'm here.
Thank you. Salvador? Montserrat?
Presente.
Gracias. Silvia?
Present.
Thank you. Ashley?
Present.
Thank you. Josephine?
I'm here.
Thank you. And Maritza?
Present.
Thank you. With that, we have quorum for today's meeting. And I'll hand it back to Julie.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance and participation. Now moving on to general updates. One quick update on the Portside Community Steering Committee side. As you saw on the attendance list, Sophia from the Green Lining Institute has joined us as an alternate to Roman Partida Lopez. Wanted to give Sophia just a few seconds to introduce herself to the group.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Sophia Haidari. I'm the program manager for capacity building with the Green Lining Institute. I joined a few months ago, so I'm taking over some of Roman's responsibilities. Apologies that I'm not on camera, having Wi-Fi issues, but happy to be here.
Great, thank you so much and welcome. And moving on, I have Adriana from the California Air Resources Board who has a quick update to share with the group.
Actually, it's me. Adri's just she'll be here, but I'm giving the announcement. Thank you.
Great.
I don't want to freak Adri out. All right. So hi everyone, Liliana Nunez from the California Air Resources Board. I wanted to give you all a heads up on a series of workshops that will be going on. So as part of CARB's work to advance racial equity, address environmental justice, and meaningfully engage with communities, we're developing a community engagement model in collaboration with communities. And it's really to help CARB staff create and implement robust engagement plans. And this community engagement model is going to set the foundation for CARB projects, policies, and programs and regulations. So today, the team that's working on that is going to start a series of public dialogue discussions on this draft community engagement model, and I'll put that in the chat in a bit. But so these meetings will go from now in December to basically the end of January. And most meetings are in person in various locations throughout the state. Today's meeting is virtual and unfortunately overlaps with this meeting. So it's from 6 to 8 p.m. But there is another opportunity to join virtually on January 25th from 6 to 8 p.m. I will start bombing the chat right now. And just let me know if you guys have any questions. But I hope to, the chat is only for hosts and panelists, and I'm not able to chat everyone. So if you can, I'm not sure if you plan to open that up, but so that attendees can also see.
Thanks for flagging that. Okay. I just opened it up.
Awesome. I will throw these links in the chat. But basically we're this draft engagement model was released in October. And again, it's already been, this draft has been developed in collaboration with community members already. But this is another step in our community engagement plan to get more, oh wow, that was fast. Sorry, I see how fast you are with translating the chat. So thanks, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks so much, Liliana. Great. That concludes all our general updates for today. So moving on to our next agenda item, which includes our standard approval of last month's meeting notes, as well as tonight's agenda. I'd like to open it up to the steering committee to see if folks are willing to make a motion and a second to approve the October meeting notes and tonight's agenda.
This is Maritza. I motion to approve the minutes and the agenda.
Thank Thank you, Maritza.
This is Nick, I second. Okay, go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Nick. Great. Is there anyone opposed or would like to propose any edits to the motion on the floor? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, so the motion is approved. Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is the annual Portside CERP progress report. As noted, we have several presentations from our partner agencies, and the San Diego Air Pollution Control District will be kicking us off. Domingo?
All right, thank you, Chuy. Good evening, everybody. Buenas noches a todos. Thank you very much for being here today. Tonight, as Chuy mentioned, we will be presenting some highlights from the Portside CERP annual progress report. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the work of our partner agencies who will be presenting with me tonight, not just for helping us put this report together, but also for their day-to-day work to implement the actions of the CERP, and also their dedication and commitment to improving air quality in the Portside community. So thank you very much for your partnership and hard work. I also want to thank all the members of the steering committee for your continued engagement, your input, your guidance throughout the implementation of the CERP. Your leadership and dedication truly makes a difference in the community that you represent. So thank you very much for that. Next slide, please. So before I begin, I want to just highlight some accomplishments in terms of emission reductions, and this is specifically from our incentives programs. As you can see on the table, we have funded a number of projects totaling a little over $16 million in funding, approximately 24 projects, and you can see the total emission reductions from all of these projects, which is something important for us to highlight and to celebrate. I also included a comparison there at the bottom, going back to our baseline for the Portside CERP, which was based on 2018 emissions, and the percentages of those emissions that have been reduced thanks to these incentive programs. Again, this is only focusing on the incentives portion. It doesn't take into account any other emission reductions based on regulatory efforts, etc. But I thought it was important to include this here as well. Next slide, please. So continuing on our incentives programs, our Clean Cars for All has entered into a soft opening phase while the program mechanics are being worked out. Grid Alternatives has been contracted to handle the administration of the program, and it has been a great asset in helping us to develop the program. SA Recycle has also been contacted to help with the dismantling piece of this program. I know this was a very important priority that was called out in the CERP, so we're very excited to see this program launch. Currently, only a few cars dealers have signed contracts to be part of the program, but we are continuing to work towards providing more options for our applicants. The program will start in earnest during the first quarter of 2024 to provide clean vehicle options for those residents living in disadvantaged communities throughout San Diego County. The Portside Air Quality Improvement and Relief Program recently concluded in October as a very successful program. Approximately 550 air monitors and air purifiers were installed in homes throughout the Portside community of San Diego. The Environmental Health Coalition was the administrator for the program and took great care to interact with the community and help make the program as successful as it was. The APCD will look to continue the success of the program and is currently evaluating a new iteration of the program that will look to expand to other areas of need throughout San Diego County. Next slide, please. In terms of some of our outreach and community engagement actions, APCD's Office of Environmental Justice continues to grow, and 2 more positions have been added to support the Office of EJ work. We anticipate onboarding these positions in early 2024. The Office of EJ staff is also working internally with all of our APCD divisions to implement our Office of EJ framework to integrate environmental justice considerations throughout our operations, including permitting and rule development. Next slide, please. In the area of rule development, the district is currently evaluating the feasibility of amending Rule 1206 related to asbestos removal, renovation, and demolition to further protect public health, including an option for community outreach on asbestos awareness. Also, the district is in the background phase of rule development activities for a possible new rule affecting restaurant cooking operations to reduce particulate matter and VOCs. Finally, the district is also currently evaluating the possibility of regulating of regulatory and non-regulatory strategies that can reduce emissions from indirect sources, such as warehouses and distribution centers. Such efforts are being supported through implementation of a local warehouse working group comprised of stakeholders from various backgrounds. The district is also collaborating with the Port of San Diego on a possible memorandum of understanding to reduce emissions from operations at the port and other actions that can support achieving goals found in the SERP and the MCAS as well. Next slide, please. So I just want to remind everybody of our air quality complaint program. As the APCD is making progress in getting to utilize portable emission analyzers to enforce district requirements for combustion sources. A vendor and a purchase agreement to conduct testing and maintenance on the analyzers has been established, and analyzers have been calibrated. Maintenance and testing has also been completed, and side-by-side comparison with source testing has also been completed. The next steps to deploy these include a procurement of calibration gases to align with draft policy and procedures. So this was something that was called out also in the SERP, very important for the community, and we're making progress. And finally, our air quality complaints mobile app is available in English and Spanish for reporting air quality complaints. Members of the public can also call SDAPCD's complaint line 24/7 on the number that you see on your screen, or on the email address you see on your screen. So this concludes some of the highlights that that the district has worked on in terms of the SERP for this past year. However, a lot of our work has also included collaborating with other agencies to make sure that actions are continuing to be implemented, and also our continued engagement with this community in our advocacy efforts to support emission reductions in the community. So with that, I will turn it over to our next presenter, which I believe is SDG&E. Yes, SDG&E, for additional updates. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Everyone. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dinah Willier with San Diego Gas and Electric's Clean Transportation Programs, with an update on the activities of this past year to support the SERP. Next slide, please. So I know I've presented this program in the past, but just want to provide it as a reminder, because it is a very important program for to assist fleets to convert their vehicles to electric vehicles and reduce the emissions in the portside communities. And in this program, the Power Drive for Fleets program, basically we connect fleet owners and with resources, fleet-friendly charging rates, and financial incentives so they can easily and cost-effectively design and install charging infrastructure for their fleets. This program basically removes some of the cost barriers associated with transitioning to an electric fleet. And typically, for the utility, we provide service up to the meter, as you can see in the graphic below here. And so in this program, we not only provide you service to the meter, but behind the meter, including everything up to the charger, but not including the charger. And we have various options where we will provide everything at no cost from the power source all the way to the interconnection with the charger at no cost. Or we provide you another option to the customer where we will provide service up to the meter. The customer will install and design everything downside of that meter to the chargers, and we will provide up to 80% rebate for that infrastructure cost. Additionally, if you're not a Fortune 1000 customer and you are located in the areas of the Portside communities, by Gillespie Field in El Cajon or in San Isidro, we also provide you up to 50% rebate for the chargers themselves. This program does go through 2025 with construction to be completed in 2026. And currently we have projects under this program at the Port General Services and also at 2 other port tenants. And we're currently in discussions with other port tenants. One other thing I do want to highlight too, we just hired an individual who has close relations with the drayage trucking community in the Otay Mesa border region that travel to the port to move goods. And we recently received applications from 2 companies that will be moving forward with the purchase of Class 8 EVs, as well as installing EV charging infrastructure through this program. So interest is growing due to some of the advanced clean fleet rules, and we expect this interest to continue. Next slide, please. Some of the education and outreach that we've done for the fleet community, really, we've had EV Fleet Day. This was held on April 6th. This was at the Port's Broadway Pavilion and had over 1,000 people attend this event, where they were able to listen to panels, regulation, take a look at vehicles, etc. It really is like a one-stop shop, so we can address some of the questions that fleet owners have. Also, we've done outreach to the San Diego Working Waterfront and Green Business Network. Also, we've participated with the Port, EHC, and AQMD on the trucker outreach that were done in this past year. Not only do we support some of the clean transportation, but as the electric utility, we have also supported many of the decarbonization projects at the Port, including, as I mentioned, the EV charging infrastructure, the proposed zero emission truck stop in National City, shore power infrastructure, electricity for the Crowley Electric Tug, their electric cranes, and projects that are at the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. Also, we are in meetings with the Port and port tenants, really to take a look at what is the electricity needs for the future as companies add more electric vehicles or decarbonize their buildings or operations. And so we are making sure that we have the available capacity when our customers need it and where they need it. And that is all I currently have for our updates.
Thank you, Dinah. I want to do a quick pause for interpretation. It sounds like folks are having some sound issues. Could Amelia and Vicky coordinate on that?
¿Sí? Ahorita sí. Ahorita sí se escuchó bien.
Okay.
Sí, apenas se está escuchando mejor, porque estaba cortado.
Okay. Gracias. Thank you all. At this point, we're going to have Lydia go through the shipyards presentation, and then we're going to go to our Q&A for the first 3. Lydia?
Great, good evening. So I'm going to review what the 3 key shipyards. We have NASCO, BAE Systems, and Continental Maritime, CMSD. You can see below in the pictures there, just kind of an update on the things we've been doing this year. So you can go to the next slide. So for action G4, which was to reduce diesel particulate matter and NOx emissions from diesel sources, some of the accomplishments we've done this year, you can see below, NASCO has purchased 3 electric buses, which help get their employees to and from the base and just to different parking areas throughout the area. They also purchased 1 electric semi-truck, which is being used to transport things throughout the community, from warehouses, etc., getting things to bases. At BAE Systems below that, you can see we purchased a 22K forklift, which is all electric, to replace a very old one that we had, and as well replaced one of our semi trucks that was from the 80s, believe it or not, with an electric Peterbilt semi truck, which is then used daily currently. We've also, at NASCO, they got 2 tier 4 final crane engines for some of the cranes that they have in their facility, reducing particulate matter even more. And then some innovative things that we've done this past year to also reduce the trucks that come in and out of the area is using a company called Smash My Trash. Smash My Trash will come in and push down the trash without touching the dumpster itself. They basically create more space in something that was typically going out with a lot of air. So we were doing a lot more truck trips to the landfill, which have been reduced by at least 20% at my site. Not quite sure on the numbers for CMSD, but that has been a really successful program to date. As well, we have some jellyfish bots at BAE Systems that can collect trash, respond to oil spills, and do bathymetric surveys, which is kind of mapping the basin floor, all things that are very good and would normally be done by boats with diesel. So those are some of the actions to reduce diesel emissions. And we can go to the next slide. One of the other actions we took was G5. It was to promote best practices for reducing emissions from ship repair activities. So this past year, we have the San Diego Ship Repair Association. April McGinley and myself took a co-lead role as for the environmental committee. And so throughout the year, we've worked very closely with Andrew, the environmental manager from NASCO, and developing trainings that we can present and kind of, it's a re-review, but we're basically just, teaching people about marine coatings and reviewing the rule and making sure that they're following the best practices on sites to reduce VOCs, as well as adhesives. Andrew also did some great presentations to some of the San Diego industry working groups. He talked about global trends in batteries, electric vehicles, and manufacturing, and also informed people on EV transition strategies. Go ahead to the next slide. One of our other actions that we took was to reduce emissions from shipyard employee transportation. So we do participate with Sandag through the iCommute program, all 3 shipyards. So this past year, we were platinum tier, which means we put in a lot of extra effort to really get people to.
Perdón, no se le entiende nada a la intérprete.
Gracias, Alicia, por anotarme.
Am I talking
Vicky,
too fast?
Vicky, could you switch with Amelia for a second? I think your audio is working better.
Let me know when.
Sorry
we
about
continue, okay, Chewy?
Hi, Amelia, I can hear you, but when the audio is simultaneous, it affects your audio. Okay, thank you.
Are we good?
Yes.
All right. So our last action, G6, is, like I said, reducing emissions from shipyard employee transportation. Is that my sound is far from the microphone?
you're
or
okay. You're okay,
I'm good? Okay. So we have a van pool program at all the shipyards to encourage employees to van pool to work through incentives also provided by Sandag. We do a tri-transit event. NASCO and BAE Systems did a tri-transit where we get people
¿Y le
to
pueden
try-
decir al intérprete que se arrime más al micrófono? No se le oye nada.
Oh, still having difficulties.
Sorry about that. We're still having difficulties with the sound.
Qué mal servicio. Pues está mal porque estamos en una junta muy importante y no se está entendiendo lo que se está diciendo.
Un momento, por favor.
Tal vez yo puedo hablar en español y los dos.
No,
Ok.
desde un principio no se escuchó bien, solo que estábamos esperando para ver si podía mejorar el audio, pero desde que empezó la junta no hemos estado escuchando casi nada. Gracias.
Honor.
Thank you, Margarita. Gracias, Margarita. Let's try doing paused, just pauses between statements, Lydia, since we can
Yeah.
hear Amelia when there's pauses and sound.
Okay.
Okay, never mind.
Never mind.
Sounds like our other interpreter is back online.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, stop me if we can't, if nobody can hear on the other side. So some of the efforts that we've made through the iCommute program this past year is through van pooling. Just as an example, BAE has about 26 different van pools that people take from throughout the county to get to work, not only freeing up parking spaces in the local neighborhood, but obviously reducing emissions that would normally come into the neighborhood. The Tri-Transit event is an opportunity to give employees free trolley passes for a month so they can try getting to work by the trolley. Those are largely successful and have grown into other programs, allowing employees to get discounts coming to work through the trolley system. There was Bike to Work Day, which was one of the more fun events I did. And, you know, we encourage employees to drive and to ride their bikes to work on that day. I think it was Bike to Work or Bike Anywhere Day, and it used to be Bike to Work Day. So apologies for saying that wrong. And then every year there are awards through Sandag, NASCO and BAE were both platinum tier level for supporting these programs through business. And so they recognize us with these plaques. But I think the most important thing is that NASCO has 69% of their employees are lone drivers, whereas BAE Systems is at 63%, which is great. That just shows that our programs, we don't have a lot of comparison right now, but the goal is to keep reducing our lone drivers to encourage less emissions and sharing of the driving, right? Go to the next slide. So just in conclusion, just the shipyards do take voluntary commitment to the SERP very seriously. It's definitely led by some very passionate people, including Andrew Aguilar from NASCO, Sarah GOB, myself in April. very, very passionate about getting out in the community and doing what we can. And we are looking forward to future opportunities to mitigate impact on our local community. Thank you so much. You guys have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Lydia, and thank you for your patience for the interpretation. Now I'd love to open it up to questions and comments to our first three interpreters. So please feel free to raise your hand, starting with Jack.
Thank you, Chewy. I wanted to ask if Domingo could bring up that very first slide he had, just so I can understand what is actually being represented there. I don't know if it's good or mediocre. Perfect. So with regard to the percentages that are expressed down here, can you explain what those mean?
Sure. Those are basically the emission reductions in relations to the initial emissions baseline that we used to develop the SERP. So in comparison, if we take into account these are the emissions at the Portside community in 2018, what percentage of those emissions have been reduced with these incentive programs? And so the total emission reductions that you see in the table were then converted into a percentage of that initial baseline amount to give us the percentages. And again, these are only incentive projects. This doesn't take into consideration any regulatory efforts that are taking place as well.
Okay, thanks. That helps a lot. I guess my follow-on question would be that in the Blue Ribbon meeting that CARB had just 6 weeks, 2 months ago, with an update on progress made, they shared that, for example, just in the AB 617 communities in California, the 17 or 19, I'm not sure which they were actually highlighting, but that there had been 791 tons of PM reduced, and 36% of all of that was or occurred in AB 617 communities around the state. So so what we're saying, or what your graph is saying, is only 1%. We only saw 1% change here in San Diego in tons of PM. Is that right?
Correct, and that's based on the incentive projects that we have funded locally in San Diego. So the numbers that CARB presented are statewide numbers that include projects, throughout the state and throughout the different AB 617 communities. So that 1% that you see is it's not our share of the total amount that CARB presented, but just our share of the emission reductions that we had here locally, what that represents based on the baseline from 2018 for Portside.
But CARB was actually only counting the cap incentives, which is the same as you're doing, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if there's 791 tons, well, we don't have a total, or are we actually it just seems awful low. Am I missing something, Domingo, in terms of why such a small change in emission reductions from PM, from ROG, from NOx, which is 9%, at least that's more respectable, and would be so much lower as a percentage of the total than what CARB was seeing in the AB 617 communities as a whole? I know it's as a whole, but it means that some were actually seeing a greater than 36% reduction in NOx. Some were seeing less, but it would seem that ours is quite low, and then PM is quite low. Am I missing something with regard to what's being shown here, or?
I mean, it would be hard to make the comparison without looking at having the side-by-side numbers from all the other AB 617 communities. But you can see also from the number of projects, I mean, there's definitely an opportunity for more projects to take advantage of the incentive programs. I know that our team has been doing a lot of outreach, and we've also been partnering with other agencies to continue to do outreach. And we're hoping to see more projects, in the future years, we do have, fortunately, we do have, a healthy amount of funding available for incentive projects. And we're just hoping that, that we continue to receive the applications so that we can continue to see additional emission reductions from this particular effort.
And I would agree. I guess I can't get my arms around what the difference is here, because it was certainly being celebrated at the CARB meeting. All the board members were quite happy about the reductions that had occurred statewide, with that enormous percentage taking place in AB 617 communities. And yet it would appear that at least in San Diego's AB 617 community, the reduction wasn't much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what that story is telling is that our share of the pie in that whole of emission reductions is not as big as in other communities. But again, we continue to encourage all of our potential applicants to submit those applications and to consider taking advantage of these incentive opportunities now that we have the funding available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for also suggesting that we share more of the numbers of emission reductions. I know that you've been following this closely, and we take your suggestions into consideration. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, exactly. Because I think we don't spend much time talking about progress that has been made. I don't think really many people understand that there has been progress made. But certainly CARB had a lot of progress to report at their meeting 2 months ago. This, although lower than I would have expected, is still progress to report. And I really appreciate your bringing that forward so all the rest of us can understand that things are moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Domingo. Moving on to Tim, followed by Nick.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question on this same slide. The infrastructure, it says 0 projects. So I wonder if is this like funding that has been allocated to projects, or is this like funding that's been made available but maybe hasn't been awarded yet?
Question. Maybe Nick can help answer this question actually.
Hi, folks.
Yes.
Hi, it's Kathy Kean with the Air District. We need to research that number. We're trying to figure out why it says 0 projects on there. Obviously, we're funding more than 0 projects for infrastructure in the Portside community. So we'll have to get back to you on that number.
And just for context, these numbers come directly from CARB's database that's available, and I'll try and include the link on the chat for everybody to see, where you can see all of the different projects that have been funded, not just in Portside, but also throughout the state through AB 617 incentive funds.
Yeah, this is Nick, and I was just going to add, I had my hand up, but I'll just throw my comment in here. Based on going back to comment before about the numbers being low, just food for thought maybe. And correct me if I'm wrong, others at APCD, but I believe the year 1 cap funds were pretty heavily skewed towards 3 air districts. I want to say Bay Area and the LA Air District, South Coast and Joaquin. They received the lion's share of that first slug of year 1 money, which could be one of the reasons why it's somewhat skewed a bit more heavily to those air districts. I think starting in year 2, we started getting larger chunks of money. So that could be one of the reasons why it looks comparatively lower in relation to kind of statewide numbers. But I'll let folks at APCD correct me if I'm wrong on that.
You're not wrong on that, Nick.
That's a great point, Nick, and thank you for highlighting that. I mean, and even though our incentive numbers, in terms of funding, have gone up since then, still the share that those other larger districts receive is also much larger than what we do receive. So that gets back to the question that Jack had asked earlier about the distribution of the emission reductions and why we're seeing perhaps more emission reductions in other districts as well.
Thank you for that. And yeah, just highlighting Paula Forbes's comment that also confirms this. Great. Any other questions or comments from any of the other presentations? None, and I'm just lowering your hands, Nick and Jack, from earlier. Tim and Jeff.
Sorry, just one more question for Dinah at SDG&E. So the comment that Power Your Drive for Fleets is ending in 2025. Just curious if there's if you anticipate any replacement program for that in the future, or if this is just kind of like a short-term, kind of temporary program that's not likely to continue, be replaced by anything.
Yes, so the program does end in 2025. We will contract through 2025 with construction to be completed in 2026. We do have a rule, so it's not a program, but it's actually one of the rules that we go by, and it's called the Rule 45. And basically, it is specifically for EV charging infrastructure. But in that program, in that rule, we basically pay for any upgrades, infrastructure upgrades up to the meter. Typically, we would provide customers allowances based on what we expect them to use and the expected revenues. And if you're going to be installing EV charging, we will provide for all the upgrades up to the meter for your project. Additionally, what we have been, I guess, it hasn't been, we don't have the final decision, but we've had a preliminary decision on what we call our, it's called TEAS. Goodness. It's basically a support program. I can't recall what the acronym stands for, but it's basically a program that will support our customers to provide guidance in terms of how to plan for their infrastructure, provide them information on funding, etc. So this program is expected to end in 2025, and then we will move over to Rule 45, which is already in existence, and then this TEAS program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nick?
Hi, everyone. A really quick question for Dinah. You had mentioned in your presentation that the port and a few port tenants had reached out about this program. I was wondering what that reception's been looking like for non-port businesses. So I don't know. Can you maybe touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so this program we started in 2022, or I'm sorry, 2020, September 2020. Currently, we have completed 20 projects. Most of those projects have really been in schools, supporting schools and transit, just because those were, specifically in Barrio Logan and National City. Is that what you're stating?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we haven't had much participation yet from, I guess, fleets within Barrio Logan and National City. I can't think of, we've been in conversation in the past with the city of National City. So this program, Power Drive for Fleets, is really for the medium heavy duty. But we also have other programs. We've had a Power Drive for Parks, where we've installed chargers at the Port District, National City, at the parks there. And then we have a Power Drive for Schools, which is another program specifically for schools as well. But this particular one is for fleets, and so we haven't had much inquiry really for Power Drive for Fleets in those areas.
Thank you.
Dinah, thank you. Nick, just want to pause for a moment. It sounds like we're having issues again with the sound, with the interpretation in Spanish. Amelia, it looks like we're having the same issue when we're having simultaneous sound your mic starts becoming really hard to hear. Got it. Thank you. And apologies. Great. Okay, we have Vicky taking over now since this is found. Thank you so much. Great. Unless there's no other questions for the three presentations, I think we can go ahead and move on to our next set of partners, starting with the Port of San Diego.
All right,
Peter?
can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, great. Evening, everyone. Peter Eicher, Program Manager at the Port of San Diego. Pleased to be here tonight to briefly review some of the Port accomplishments over the past year. Next slide, please. There are 10 actions in the Community Emission Reduction Plan the Port participates in implementing, and the first is regarding heavy-duty trucks. The Port has adopted, the first accomplishment is that the Port has adopted our heavy-duty zero-emission truck transition plan, and it has a number of strategies, which include providing technical assistance to truck operators, pursuing funding opportunities and offering subsidies to reduce the initial cost of buying these zero-emission trucks, assisting in the planning, design, and implementation of zero-emission infrastructure, and also supporting and promoting the goals and policies that increase the adoption of zero-emission trucks. A number of other things that we've done is in partnership with EHC and APCD, we held a number of outreach events at the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. We were able to speak directly with truckers, talk to them about the regulations that are coming forward, EV truck incentives that we have, that the APCD has, just trying to get them up to speed that the technology is changing, and we're here to help them make that transition to EV trucks. Lastly, we also entered into an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with Caltrans, and this is really to solidify our partnership working on sustainable transportation and good movement operations. Next slide, please. Another action taken by the Port of San Diego is in regard to the zero-emission truck stop in National City. My colleague Maggie Weber, who is leading this project, was going to talk about this project with you all, but tonight's kind of a time constraint and we don't have a meeting next month, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit here. So a request for proposals was opened up in late April, and that was open until early August. We asked the proposals to address a design, build, operate, and maintain a zero-emission truck stop on at least one of the three parcels that are on this map, or all the parcels, or two of the parcels, just any kind of combination. Together, they are about 13 acres. The RFP requested the businesses to come up with a model that lists those aspects that are on the slide: battery electric technology, project design that builds out the site in a phased approach based on anticipating an increase in utilization, increasing battery of distributed energy resource, to offset those impacts to the electrical grid, provide some kind of community benefits, have a revenue sharing agreement, and on-site amenities. And although open to the public, it will be providing preferential charging to trucks that call to the port's marine cargo terminals. Recently, we did have that RFP responded. We whittled it down to 2 firms that presented their proposals at the Board of Port Commissioners hearing in November, just a couple of weeks ago. And during that meeting, they heard feedback not only from the board, but also from the public. The project proponents will be allowed to fine-tune their proposals based on that feedback, and then they will be presenting their final proposal back to staff in about a month. And staff then recommends, or will be recommending one of the projects to our board in early 2024. Next slide, please. Okay, so back to the SERP action specifically and dedicated truck routes. So the port does support the dedicated truck routes in Barrio Logan and National City, but because these routes are not located on port tidelands, we do not enforce the traffic laws. That said, we do condition all the projects that receive a coastal development permit on the working waterfront to recognize and follow these routes. At the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal, we provide maps to truckers especially the ones that do not frequent the terminals that often. These are produced in English and Spanish. Got some examples there on the slide. And we also have a community hotline that people can call with concerns about trucks and excessive noise. That number is also on the slide. Next slide, please. A couple of actions here captured on this slide. One regarding land use buffers. The port has been working to update its master plan. We call it the Port Master Plan Update. It contains an environmental justice element that includes policies that are related to land use, basically keeping incompatible uses separated and buffered from one another, and also promoting land uses that work well together. Regarding urban greening, we had a successful tree planting event about a year ago in Cesar Chavez Park. We were able to plant about 20 trees. This was a really fun event where we had volunteers work with local school children to get these trees planted. Next slide, please. Another combination here, as I mentioned earlier, we did enter into a memorandum of understanding with Caltrans to advance a lot of transportation projects like Harbor Drive 2.0. The Port Master Plan update, which I also just mentioned, has a mobility element, and that mobility element includes policies that provide equitable and multimodal transportation options to, from, and around port tidelands. Lastly, the port contributed $400,000 from the Maritime Industrial Impact Fund for the FRANK program in National City. And FRANK stands for Free Ride Anywhere in National City. So this is an electric vehicle. It's free of charge and it is free of emissions, and it takes you around National City. Next slide, please. Cargo handling equipment. Some of you may have heard that the port now has 2 mobile harbor cranes. These cranes, they replace the oldest and dirtiest operating piece of cargo handling equipment on the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. Our port tenants are also turning over their equipment. This last year, 5 electric yard trucks were purchased, and these are trucks that stay on the terminal. They don't leave the terminal, they don't go on road. So even though they're called trucks, they are considered cargo handling equipment. And then we also had the addition of a zero emission heavy lift, and that replaced a diesel powered heavy lift. And it's just like the name sounds, it lifts very heavy things on the terminal and moves them around. Next slide, please. Ocean-going vessels. A second shore power system became active last January. So now when you see 2 cruise ships in port, both are plugged in and their engines are shut off. The first system was installed in 2010, and we're really happy that we have a second system now. Another action was the Board of Port Commissioners approved over $7 million for the final design and construction of the National City Marine Terminal Phase 1 shore power system. So this is a phase 1. We're going to have a few more phases, but when this is up and running in a couple of years, we will be able to plug in ships when they come to terminal. We also have a voluntary vessel speed reduction program. Essentially, we ask ships to slow down once they are 40 nautical miles, and then we ask them to slow down another 20 nautical miles out from San Diego Bay. So as they are coming into the bay, we ask them to slow down. This saves them fuel. We like to remind them of that because it helps them save money. But really, this does reduce a lot of emissions that then come onto shore eventually. We have a lot of great participation in this program, but we do recognize we can do better, and we're always working with vessel operators to understand what their constraints are and see how we can improve that program. Next slide, please. Harborcraft. Many of you have probably heard about the all-electric tugboat, the eWolf. The charging infrastructure is currently under construction, and we anticipate the tug arriving early next year, hopefully any day now, actually, but we'll see. It's probably a couple more months out. This is a first all-electric tugboat, so it's first of its kind. We've had some design challenges, some building and construction challenges, but that said, that's why the delays are happening. But everyone involved is really working hard, and we're really excited that San Diego is getting this, first of its kind technology, and really the investment that it represents, which is many millions of dollars, both in the tug itself and the charging infrastructure. So a very, very exciting improvement. Next slide, please. Regarding adopting zero emission technologies, we were just talking a little bit about power your fleet, adopt your fleet, and that's what the port is doing with in a partnership with SDG&E. We are converting our entire fleet, and actually the numbers here are a little bit old because we've got more trucks even since I sent this over for translation. So instead of 15 vehicles, we now actually have 19 total EVs in our roster, and we are expecting 7 more by June. We've found with these EV vehicles that when we get out in the public and we're driving around, we're using them, it really helps getting that action. People seem to be really interested. They ask questions. We were at the EV Day held by SDG&E this fall at Snapdragon Stadium. We had one of our e-transit cargo vans there. It was fully loaded, had gear and equipment, and people were really curious about it and are asking a lot of questions about, how it works. And so we really find again that when it's out there, it's being demonstrated that people really catch on to it and it piques their interest. Next slide, please. Okay, lastly, the ports, we did produce a health risk assessment. We've talked to this group a number of times about that. We produced that last July, and then we followed up with a publication of a fact sheet and frequently asked questions. These were published in both English and Spanish. Really, the effort was to more clearly communicate the intent and the limits and the results of that study. It's a little bit technical and complex, and so we were really trying to just kind of boil it down to the basics of it. And all of these documents are available on our website. Next slide, please. And all the information related to the MCAS and our actions on the SERP can be found on our website. That's the address there. It's an easy one to remember. And if you have any questions that I can't answer today or other questions that come up along the way, that email address there on the bottom of the slide is really the best one to get a hold of us. You don't have to remember our names or how to spell them. It's quick and easy, just mcas@portofsandiego.org. Just like to thank everyone's time tonight and congratulate all the presenters and the members of the CSC for all the progress that we've collectively been making to improve public health and reduce air pollution. I'm really encouraged by the consistent participation by the CSC members in this group. I think your participation in this group and support for the projects, some of which I've just gone through, is really important and really does make a difference. So thank you for that. Back to you, Chewy.
So much, Peter. Now we'll hand it over to Samantha and team from the U.S. Navy, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments. So thank you for your patience. And at this moment, one of my colleagues will add the Spanish version of this presentation to the chat. Samantha?
All right, thanks, Chewy. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sam Spidell, and I am the Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command Southwest, or NAVFAC Southwest, Air Quality Compliance Program Manager. I'll be providing you all with the Navy's SERP updates tonight, and I'm also going to be joined by Teresa Breslow, who is our NAVFAC Southwest Planning Conservation Supervisor, who is going to be providing a brief overview on the Naval Base San Diego Mole Pier Floating Dry Dock Project. All right, so it's been a while since we presented, so I wanted to start out by giving an overview of kind of big picture of who Navy Region Southwest is. You can see a number of facts listed here, but just to highlight a few, Navy Region Southwest is made up of 10 different installations with 189 special areas, 17 Navy support operation centers, and 42 piers and wharves. Each installation essentially acts as its own small city with their own federal fire and police departments, healthcare. They also have their own housing units, child care centers, and youth programs. And what's really unique about each of these 10 installations is that they have their own dedicated environmental staff on site to manage all the different environmental aspects, compliance aspects for the installation. Next slide, please. All right, so this slide was being hidden. This slide shows the 10 Navy Region Southwest installations. Southern California actually has the largest military concentration area in the world, which includes the Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Army, and Coast Guard. Highlighted in the yellowish gold color at the bottom of the map are the Metro San Diego installations, which includes Naval Base Point Loma, Naval Base Coronado, and Naval Base San Diego. The San Diego area actually has the largest fleet concentration area in the US. Next slide, please. All right, so as I mentioned in the last slide, Metro San Diego consists of 3 Navy installations: Naval Base Coronado, which hosts our aircraft carriers; Naval Base Point Loma hosts our submarines; and Naval Base San Diego is the primary home port for the Pacific Fleet vessels. And what's important to note from this slide is that there's a planned 14% increase in operational units from fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2026 to meet the demands of overall mission readiness. So we're going to be seeing some expansion in vessels in the next few years. Next slide, please. So as most of you know, Naval Base San Diego neighbors the Portside community. A little bit about Naval Base San Diego. Naval Base San Diego encompasses 5 geographically dispersed locations plus housing areas, which includes the Naval Base San Diego main base, the 750 Pacific Highway Complex, which is downtown, Admiral Baker, Balboa Hospital, and Murphy Canyon. And again, Naval Base San Diego is the primary home port of the Pacific Fleet to about 60 or so warships, I think, at this point, with about 30 to 35 vessels in port at a given time. There are 81 air permits that are managed just at Naval Base San Diego, and due to the great dedication efforts of the entire environmental staff and installation, Naval Base San Diego actually won the 2023 Secretary of the Navy Award in the sustainability category this past year. Next slide, please. So some of the sources of emissions that require air permits at Naval Base San Diego include emergency generators, fuel dispensing equipment, corrosion control activities, abrasive blasting, marine coating, adhesive operations, stripping tanks, firefighting training, boilers, and off-road and on-road vehicles. And a lot of this does support the ship maintenance and repair capabilities of the base. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to talk about the Mole Pier floating dry dock.
Thanks, Sam. This is Teresa Bressler. As Sam mentioned, I'm the Environmental Planning and Conservation Branch Manager here for the Navy Southwest region. Just wanted to give you a very brief introduction to one of the projects that the Navy is focusing on here in the San Diego region. I think some of what Sam spoke to about the fleet concentration and some of the mission requirements we have will help understand why this project's really important to the Navy. So I'll give you a little understanding of the project, the need, and then the environmental document that we're working on for that. So I'll apologize. My camera has been giving me trouble, so you won't have a camera from me tonight, but I will let you enjoy the slides in spite of the fact my camera's not working. So first, I just wanted to mention, given the need, the mission, and the need that we have here in the San Diego region for repair and maintenance of our ships and our vessels within the bay, the Navy is interested in and does have a need to actually provide for additional dry dock space in the San Diego Bay. Specifically, we're looking at the Naval Base San Diego complex for that. Right now, the Navy does not have sufficient dry dock space to essentially meet the need for the repair and maintenance of our vessels. And so we are looking at adding an additional dry dock specifically owned by the Navy for our exclusive use. Right now we have 4 dry docks available. Those are privately owned and operated. And so having one specific for the Navy to use would give us primacy of use in terms of scheduling, something very important for us in terms of our mission requirements. So I think I'll go next slide, please. So this slide, just a little bit of information. The slide on the right shows kind of the general area where Naval Base San Diego is and what we're looking at putting the floating dry dock over on the south berth. I think I wanted to basically focus on here The floating dry dock is currently under construction, actually in Mobile, Alabama, and it's looking to be transported out to San Diego for berthing at the Mole Pier summer of 2025. We're looking at starting construction hopefully in the early spring of 2024, just getting site preparation and such done. Next slide, please. So the Navy is working on currently preparing a supplemental environmental assessment for the floating dry dock. As context, we did prepare an environmental assessment in 2020 that addressed this project. Once we went through the design of the project, we determined that there was a need to provide an update to some of the information that we had analyzed in terms of dredging depths, some of the design features, and some of the sediment sampling that we did. So we determined a supplemental EA was necessary for the project. That project document went out for review to the public in basically the August timeframe. We are currently in the process of completing our consultations and finalizing the document from, before moving to make a decision on the project. So I think that's all I had for tonight. I don't think I have any other slides. I think it's your turn, Sam.
Thanks, Teresa. All right, so now I'm going to go into the Navy SERP updates. So the Navy's been working on supporting and implementing various actions to support the SERP, and these include the following actions. Action G2 to reduce emissions from ships at berth. Action G5, promote best practices for reducing diesel, VOC, and other emissions from ship repair activities. Action G7, promote adoption of zero emission technologies by port tenants, truckers, and other users of equipment. And then action G8, which is reducing emissions associated with traffic at Naval Base San Diego. Next slide, please. So action G2, reducing emissions from ships at berth. The Navy continues to utilize shore power since the 1980s through something that is called cold ironing. So when Navy vessels return to port and are docked, the vessels turn off their diesel engines and connect to shore power, which ultimately reduces greenhouse gas emissions by up to 98%. The Navy also continues to upgrade and expand its infrastructure and is working to expand its shore power capabilities through funding provided by the state's low carb fuel standard program. Next slide, please. Action G5 is to promote best practices for reducing diesel, VOC, and other emissions from ship repair activities. As mentioned earlier, each installation has their own dedicated environmental staff to manage all environmental compliance aspects, including air quality. There are numerous tenants and stakeholders that oversee environmental compliance at the installation, but overseeing kind of all of it, big picture, are actually two different environmental teams that support Naval Base San Diego, the Naval Base San Diego Environmental Team and the Southwest Regional Maintenance Center SWRMAC Environmental Team. The air quality compliance teams at Naval Base San Diego regularly review ship maintenance and repair activities and equipment, which also includes ensuring that all the different portable diesel engines conducting ship repair work at Naval Base San Diego are the highest engine tier available. The Naval Base San Diego environmental staff also hosts a required monthly Ships Force Marine Coding and Waterfront requirement training. And our team also goes on boards the ships to conduct what we call ship assist visits to ensure that all the permitting requirements are followed and best management practices are utilized. In addition to that, the Naval Base San Diego environmental staff is on the waterfront 7 days a week doing inspections. We have a really dedicated, enthusiastic waterfront program manager, Mr. David Nelson, who works closely with Ships Forces, SWRMAC, and all the different contractors out on the piers to ensure that the piers and waterfront remain environmentally compliant. This isn't just limited to the weekdays. Like I mentioned, the Naval Base San Diego environmental staff also conducts inspections on the weekends. Lastly, the Navy has collaborated with San Diego Air Pollution Control District on a new air monitoring station that will be installed on Harbor Drive. And we're happy to report that the real estate agreement was finalized, and I believe APCD is now working on installment, and we should hopefully see it installed within the next year. Next slide, please. Action G7 is to promote the adoption of zero emission technologies. So the Navy has planned for and is currently committed to more than $20 million in environmental infrastructure upgrades at Naval Base San Diego this year. The Navy's going to be installing 340 chargers across Naval Base San Diego. This effort is going to support our transition to electric vehicle fleets while also improving the air quality in the Portside community. And this project was awarded in September of 2023. Naval Base San Diego also continues to increase its renewable energy assets. A microgrid project is scheduled to be awarded in early calendar year of 2024. The project will provide 300 kilowatts of renewable on-site generation and 1 megawatt or 8 megawatt hour of battery storage. And the project will provide renewable and redundant power to key Naval Base San Diego facilities and also reduce electric load on the SDG&E grid. Next slide, please. And the last update we have to discuss is Action G8, which is reducing emissions associated with traffic at Naval Base San Diego. The Navy is a large proponent for telework for personnel whose work allows for it. This schedule flexibility reduces traffic that affects the different surrounding communities. Unnecessary emissions and of course noise have been minimized due to the decrease in vehicle miles traveled due to this. In addition to the telework policy, the Navy also supports a transportation incentive program and SANDAG's iCommute program, which encourages, incentivizes personnel to utilize the public transportation or carpooling. The Navy continues to alleviate traffic by increasing security checkpoints during peak traffic hours. This is really important because about 30,000 personnel go through the gates every day. So they're always looking for different ways to alleviate the traffic, cut down on time spent in the car. The sailors who reside at Naval Base San Diego are also required to use a base shuttle service provided when traveling across the base from the dry side to the wet side and vice versa during peak hours. The shuttle service has been improved as of October to include 3 different routes, increased bus stops, and extended morning and afternoon hours. The Navy also continues to implement and support the e-bike program to further alleviate traffic and air emissions. We currently have lift bikes on base that have been in operation for approximately, I think, 8 months that are positioned to correspond with the base shuttle and major demand locations. All right, next slide. And that is all I have. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or my alternate, Sergio. Thanks.
Much, Samantha. Now I want to take a quick Q&A break. I did notice that Jose Luis had a question during the Port of San Diego's presentation. And I see your hand is not raised anymore, so let us know, Jose Luis.
Yeah, I did just answer the question about chargers in the chat. So if that's okay, I can leave that there. There was also a question about the point of the health risk assessment that I brought up. So quickly, basically, we commissioned that health risk assessment to identify the baseline health risk associated with diesel particulate matter emanating from our 2 marine terminals. So not all of the working waterfront, just the 2 marine terminals. And really, we do this to establish a baseline so we can really measure our progress as we implement the Maritime Clean Air Strategy and the Community Emission Reduction Plan, so we can see that progress and that improvement in public health. And again, those documents are available on our website. And if there's any further questions on that, I'm happy to answer those or follow up on an offline conversation with anybody.
Peter. I see there's two hands raised. So quickly, can we start with Jack, followed by John?
Thanks, Julie. Just real quick, that CARB meeting that I mentioned earlier that took place the end of October, I just wanted to point out that they took time to applaud San Diego, specifically the ports programs moving forward, particularly the electric tug and the cranes as one of a kind, first time in California. And it was kind of nice to see our region getting recognized for the efforts that have gone into all of this over the last 4 years down here. Because as you know, being this great distance from Sacramento, we don't always get viewed or noted for doing all the things we're doing. But anyway, there was no shortage of discussion about it, and it was good to see.
Thanks, Jack. John?
Yeah, my question is there kind of any kind of special assistance for military or anyone who's working on the base, you know, to try to go electric, or for that matter, you know, electric bike or anything like that? You know, is there any special programs for them?
I'm not sure I understand. Are you asking for people who are just going on our installation that don't work there?
It sounded kind of garbled. What I'm asking is there any special provisions financially to help service members or workers on the military base to go, if you will, green? You know, with electric cars, or for that matter, electric bikes and that type of thing.
I am not aware of specific incentives to service members for going green in that sense outside of the different programs that I discussed. I could look into that and get back to you though.
Yeah, I think that would be real helpful for many, especially now with the economy being what it is. And it's kind of tough for a lot of folks.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Samantha. Nick?
Hi, thank you, Teresa, and Samantha for the presentation. I actually have a question for Teresa about the dry dock project. This is kind of the first time that I'm hearing about that project, and it sounds like the public comment period is kind of past. Can you talk a little bit about the air quality impacts that project's going to be having on the port side? What kind of commitments the Navy's doing to try to reduce those air quality impacts? Is there a chance for us to comment? Yeah.
So I'm sorry, this is Teresa Bressler. I'm assuming that question might have been for me, and I got dropped, and I'm back. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, Teresa,
Uh-huh.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about the air quality impacts of the dry dock project, and the opportunity for community members to weigh in and comment. I think this is the first time I'm hearing of this project, so I just wanted to check in.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Like I mentioned, we are at the final EA stage, and we did provide it for public review in August. But we were contacted basically subsequent to that by APCD, mentioned that there would be interest in this project from the community, and invited us to this meeting this evening. So what I'd like to do is, the document is still open. We're working on finaling it, but I'd like to work with, maybe I can go through Chewy to provide you with that particular section of the document or the document itself to take a look at, and we can coordinate through the CSC to make sure that you get a chance to look at that. We did analyze air quality impacts. That's something that's included in the document. I think I completely understand you want to take a look at that. So if maybe Chewy, if it's okay with you, work to try and offer that document to take a peek at again.
Definitely. Happy to coordinate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Uh-huh.
Perhaps we can incorporate it into the notes when you send out the notes for the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, everybody. For sake of time, want to quickly move over to both of our city representatives to provide their updates on the SERP, starting with the city of San Diego. Shelby?
All right, sorry. Yeah, I also just got dropped and back now, I think. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Perfect. I'm trying to pull everything back up. All right. So I will, for the sake of time, try to kind of speed through the first bits of some of these slides so you can go through the next to the next slide. But I'm Shelby Busso. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer. Keith Corey is also on the line. So when we get to questions, the two of us can answer them. I'm in the Sustainability and Mobility department, and he is also joining us from the mayor's office. And so I think between the two of us, we can kind of point you in the right direction, no matter what kind of policy or implementation questions you have related to a lot of these topics. But I was going to give a quick overview. I think a lot of you are familiar with our climate action plan. I may just kind of breeze through that part and then also mention a little bit of our climate equity work. But if you do have any other follow-up questions on that work, you can talk to either one of us, and happy to talk to more of that as much as possible. And I'll try to speak slowly, of course, as well too. Okay, next slide. So this is the climate emergency that we speak to all the time when we talk about our climate action plan. This is just simply the justification for the need to update our climate action plan. I'll just kind of leave this here and say that we have a robust climate action plan that was updated in 2022. And our top line goal is really to achieve net zero by 2035. We do that through 6 strategies: decarbonization of the built environment, access to clean and renewable energy, mobility and land use, circular economy and clean communities, resilient infrastructure and healthy ecosystems. And then in strategy 6, that's where we find our emerging climate solutions. And then I won't go into all the details of each one of those strategies. You can find them on our website. Or again, like I said, I'm available for questions to talk through what our actions are. And then later in the presentation, we'll just get into some of the crosswalks with the SERP and some of the related portside activities that'll be most relevant to this conversation. Next slide. It's also worth noting that our climate action plan does specifically express the concerns that we heard from the residents in the communities that were the most severely impacted by air quality. And we wanted to see, and those community residents did want to see significant steps taken by the city to address this. And to respond to that input, we did include a clean air section in the climate action plan dedicated to air quality and bettering the public health of our residents. It outlines in this section the strategies, measures, and actions that, while reducing and avoiding greenhouse gas emissions, will also improve air quality in those communities. A good example of that would be from the Portside Community's emissions reduction plan, as well as actions to decarbonize our buildings, to increase zero emissions vehicles, a commitment to plant new trees, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll touch upon those. Next slide. As I mentioned, climate equity is integral to everything that we do in San Diego. We do strive to put communities first with all of our work, especially in climate justice. And I'll just briefly reiterate that our definition of climate equity is to address historical inequities suffered by people of color allowing everyone to fairly share the same benefit and burden from climate solutions and obtain full and equal access to opportunities, regardless of one's background and identity. Next slide. We incorporated equity into the development of our CAP by consulting with the Informal Climate Equity Working Group. We assessed every single action for its potential for equitable impact, and we ensure that our decisions are based on community input and engagement, and we include prioritization of engagement with our communities of concern. Next slide. So there are several places in our climate action plan that the actions align with the CERP priorities, namely through ongoing coordination, support, and implementation. So I'll focus on a few here. So in strategy 2, access to clean and renewable energy, we find actions that explore the development of a citywide policy for utilizing surplus land for EV charging, supporting school bus fleet conversions, and advancing medium and heavy duty vehicle adoption in Portside communities. Next slide. In strategy 3, our mobility and land use strategy, we call out actions to work with partners on feasibility study to identify the best truck route to 10th Ave Marine Terminal, an action for diversion, traffic calming, and appropriate signage, and an action for emissions reduction opportunities with APCD in communities of concern. Next slide. In our emerging solutions section, the city called out our commitment to advocate for APCD to develop SERP-like plans in all communities to demonstrate the process of implementation and the outcomes of actions to date, and to continue seeking opportunities and funding to improve air quality in some of the city's most affected neighborhoods. Next slide. So there are a few other noteworthy environmental justice crossovers, namely to advance the deployment of heavy-duty on-road electric trucks to demonstrate operational feasibility and reduce emissions within the Portside community and other disadvantaged communities, to support dedicated truck routes and avoid truck impacts to the local community, to support Harbor Drive multimodal corridor, city land use proposals, and to improve transportation efficiencies. So I'll stop there for now. And again, we'll just be here to answer questions about any of the other specific work.
We'll move on to the City of National City and then open it up for questions. David?
Good evening. My name is David Welch. I am with the Planning Division at the City of National City. Next slide, please. So for action strategy E1, encouraging prioritization of zero emission vehicles. In our city fleet, we already have 4 zero emission vehicles, a total of 21 hybrid vehicles, and the city's intention is to replace older vehicles with zero emission vehicles moving forward. As noted earlier, Free Ride Around National City is now operating. That's the Frank. Next slide. And here's a detail of how it operates. We have the highlighted area in red where you can access this free transit service, and it operates Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays and Sundays, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. So this is up and going. So if you're in the National City area, feel free to utilize this service. Next slide. Action strategy E3, notify relevant parties of designated truck routes, improving truck route street signage infrastructure throughout the city as needed, and continue enforcement of the truck route. So we now have a truck route map that's available on the city's website. Next slide. So you can find that here. It's easily available online. Next slide. We're implementing on-street signage, and then permittees are given the map. It's distributed to folks getting hauling permits, grading permits, or other types of transportation permits from the City of National City. Next slide. Action strategy F1, set amortization, implementation, and timeline goals. Just kind of layman's terms, amortization is a program the City of National City has in which we'd be essentially buying out polluting businesses to modify the land uses in our west side specifically. Upcoming in 2024, last time we ranked the businesses that are polluting in National City was in 2020. The ranking was paused due to COVID, but we are still in contact with our vendor that helped us with that previously. And we're looking at fine-tuning this ranking and restarting amortization implementation sometime next year. The next one here is adopt the balance plan with Pepper Park expansion. We have completed the first phase of the city's local coastal program amendment at the city level. However, this is also in conjunction with the balance plan in the Port Master Plan amendment. So both of those are supposed to be going together for the at the California Coastal Commission with the hearing in February of next year. Next slide. Support adoption of the balance plan. We continue to coordinate with the Port District on that balance plan. If you're unfamiliar with that, the basic idea is sort of a rearrangement of land uses with the port and the coastal access with Pepper Park and our marina and all that. So we're trying to rearrange it to be more efficient and give better access to the community. The next part of that is to pursue grant funding opportunities. We have currently we have a grant fund of $50,000 for that second phase of the local coastal program amendment. Our engineering and housing departments are our primary areas where we receive grant money. They continue to do a great job pulling in grant monies for different program or projects. You'll hear more about that in a second. We don't have a dedicated person or department that works on grants, unfortunately, at the moment. Next slide. Support implementation of portion of Harbor Drive 2.0. That's within our jurisdiction. So I'm going to give a lot of updates from our engineering department related to projects related to active transportation and movement within the city. So first up, we have 8th Street in Harbor Drive, providing additional left turn pockets to improve access to Gate 9 at the Naval Base. We have a $2 million active transportation grant for the construction, and we're waiting for funds to be released to fund the project design for that one. Next slide. And then 8th Street and Harbor Drive, a reconfiguration of westbound 8th Street to allow additional through lanes to get to the Naval Base. Once again, we have that $2 million grant. And we're waiting for the release of funding to fund the project design. So once again, that's in progress. Next slide. At Civic Center and Harbor Drive, we are working on dual eastbound left turn lanes to increase capacity from Interstate 5. We also have construction funding in place, and the city is working on selecting a design engineer for the design phase in the coming months. Next slide. And then the 8th Street and Roosevelt Avenue active transportation corridor. This would include Class 2 bike lanes connecting Harbor Drive, the 8th Street trolley and bus station, and National City communities. Pedestrian upgrades, including rail crossing gates and curb ramps, wayfinding facilities, and then enhance pedestrian bicycle connections between the Naval Base, 8th Street Trolley Station, and downtown National City. We have a little over $5 million in state funding for the construction. City is waiting for funding to do the project design, and the total construction cost is looking at $7 million. Next slide. The 24th Street Transit Center connections projects. Again, we have a lot of different kind of bike and pedestrian improvements in the surrounding neighborhood and streets. The city has successfully applied for funding for this project and the different elements. We will fund design and construction phases of this project, and the design engineer will be selected in the next few months. Next slide. For the Bayshore Bikeway, there's a project to relocate it from Thailand Avenues to Marina Way and McKinley Avenue. We're close to completing the design phase of this project, and it will be going out for construction bids in early 2024, with hope to start construction on Bayshore Bikeway in the middle of 2024. Next slide. Support Bay Marina Drive active transportation connection from east of Interstate 5 to gates on Terminal Avenue. This particular project is on hold. We don't have funding to finance the project. As you can see, we're already working with several grants, so hopefully this is something that can get attention later on. And next slide. Once again, National City Wayfinding signage project throughout National City. We have a project design for this, and we're looking at advertising this for construction in the next few months. Next slide. And support 8th Street Urban Trail from Harbor Drive to D Avenue. This project is also on hold. We don't have funding in place. We don't have a grant currently in place to work on this. So hopefully this is something we'll see in the future. Next slide. So that is all I have for you today. A lot of projects that our engineering department is working on. Again, my name is David Welch, and we also have Martin Reeder, our planning manager, that also participates in the Portside Communities meetings. I'll drop our contact info in the chat if you need that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. We are running up against the clock, so we have time for one question for either of our presenters from the cities. If there's any other questions, feel free to add them to the chat, and our presenters can also help answer those. Great. John and Margarita, starting with John.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Many of us are at that point in time of life where many of the factors that are going on right now with the air pollution and whatnot, has very, very negative consequences for many of us. And I'm told by doctors and others that if the AB 617, the City of National City, the City of San Diego would basically issue, let's just say, a letter stating that there is a real problem, that people like myself can get a tax-deductible donation for medical necessity for equipment. Now, we have the little filters, but that means all this pollution has to come into your house first. And then, hopefully it'll clean out the room of grandma and grandpa, but how about the kids in the next room? Now, I've been doing a lot of research, and there's equipment out there that will completely clean the air before it even comes into your space. And many of these devices you could just put in your window, kind of like an air conditioner, right? And many of which have filters on them. But it would be wonderful if we could go ahead and have the cities and so on and so forth, because we might be able to actually get both state and federal tax money reduction because of the medical necessity. My question is, are the people involved here, both in the port and on the cities and whatnot, would you be willing to put something out like that? Because it would make it so much easier for us to be able to just go ahead, apply for it, have your doctor say, yes, this is medical necessity, and you can write it off. Thank you.
I believe this is something being discussed at the SERP implementation subcommittee, but not sure if any of the partner agencies have any response to that.
I'm not sure that, I would be the best person to respond, but something we can, look into, see if it's something being discussed at all.
Great. Thank you, Shelby. Great. Margarita?
Ok, buenas tardes. Quisiera saber, soy de, soy de National City y yo oí mucho que hablaron acerca de National City, pero no escuché nada de que hablaran de USDG Fuel, que es una nueva compañía que quieren meter aquí en National City, que va a contaminar mucho. Y otra de las cosas que va a hacer, ¿sí? ¿Puedo seguir?
I'm in a meeting. Can I call you right back?
Sí, perdón.
¿Continúo?
Sí.
Ah, ok. Y yo he ido a juntas y esa compañía va a contaminar mucho aquí en National City y de eso no hablaron, no dieron ningún tema acerca de eso. Es una compañía que va a ser muy dañina para la comunidad y va a enfermar mucho y no se hacen responsables de si pasa cualquier cosa y van a transportar combustible. O sea, hablan de muchas cosas que han hecho, pero bueno, yo quiero y mi comunidad que no le den permiso de que se ponga esa compañía en National City. Ya tenemos muchas compañías aquí en National City y en Barrio Logan y muy cerca de aquí. Y otra cosa que quería comentar de la ciudad de San Diego, ¿cuáles son los compromisos que han cumplido o cuál es el progreso que han hecho? Eso es todo.
Gracias, Margarita. David, were you on the English channel or did you understand Margarita's question and comment?
Yes, I can respond to the National City comment. So I am the project reviewer on the National City side for the USD Clean Fuels Terminal. The latest update on that is the city has requested to the applicant that they prepare a full EIR for that project, which could take approximately 18 to 24 months for them to complete. So once an EIR has been completed, we will have a better knowledge of what the potential impacts on the community might be and what the response from that company will be. Overall, that project requires the approval of a conditional use permit as well as a coastal development permit. That is a discretionary project, which means it would have to go through the public hearing before our planning commission, followed by our city council. So that project is still in the very early stages, and they are proposing to construct a fuel terminal where they would take clean diesel fuel, so like biodiesel, from trains on the BNSF railway in the west side, not the west side, but west of the Interstate 5, and it'd be loaded onto regular trucks in which it would be distributed to service stations within 35 miles of National City for use by the public. So that's the information I have on that project right now. It is quite a bit on hold while they continue to work on their environmental documentation.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
And yeah, I believe that's related to the same questions from Janice in the chat. As more updates come up, feel free to send them to me, David, so I can share with the committee as well. And if folks have any questions, let us know how they can best contact you. Great. I do want to flag that we only have a few minutes left to our scheduled time. I want to check in with the Sandec and Caltrans team if they would be open to doing their presentation, since we do have this meeting recorded, even if it goes a little after. And if folks need to sign off, they're welcome to do so.
That's okay with me.
Great, thank you. Okay, We'll start with Sandag. Caltrans team, if you need to sign off, please just let us know. But if you can, we'd appreciate it so we can have your presentation recorded.
Great. Ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your patience. I'll go through this relatively quickly. I know that folks are pretty familiar with a lot of the projects that I'll be discussing in the update tonight. So my name is Tim Garrett, Regional Planner with Sandag, and happy to be here to provide an annual update on our progress at Sandag. So next slide, please. So I'll just briefly mention the actions that Sandag's responsible for in the SERP. So this first one here is about advancing deployment of heavy-duty on-road electric trucks to demonstrate operational feasibility and reduce emissions. So next slide, please, for updates. So Sandag's role specifically within this action is to develop an EV strategy for the region, including especially opportunities in the Portside community. So a few things I want to point out that we've been making progress on are the San Diego Regional Medium and Heavy Duty Zero Emission Vehicle Blueprint. This is a planning project that our staff presented to the committee last month on, and we're making good progress, and so that project is nearly complete. We also completed in March 2023 the Regional EV Charger Management Strategy. And that is it's also regional, but it takes a broader look beyond just medium and heavy duty, but also EV chargers in general for light duty vehicles. Next slide, please. Two other updates on this one. We worked on a white paper along with Caltrans and Imperial County Transportation Commission. It was called the Zero Emission Freight Transition at the California-Baja California border. And so this was published in April of 2023, and it was really taking a look at some of the specific challenges to doing zero emission transition, specifically in the border region. So that includes San Diego County, Imperial County, and then in Baja California. So taking a look at the specific challenges around the transition. And then we are also participating now in a binational working group, which is going to identify funding and legislation that will facilitate the transition and really try to tackle some of those barriers that were identified in the white paper. And that white paper is, for more information, is on our website. Happy to refer you to where that is. Next slide, please. The next action that we participate in is supporting the dedicated truck route and avoiding truck impacts to the local community. So next slide, please. Sandag's role is to support inclusion of Harbor Drive improvements in the regional plan, as well as provide technical assistance regarding geofencing and other ITS technologies. So this is really core to what Sandag does as a metropolitan planning organization, is to prepare the regional plan, which is a really important blueprint for long-range transportation investments in the region. So Harbor Drive 2.0 is in fact in the adopted 2021 regional plans. That means it's in the document. We're planning on building it. And that was adopted in December 2021. Is also included in the related document, the South Bay to Sereno Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Program, corridor plan. So that's a more specific plan that looks at a corridor, and that's the one that included the Harbor Drive and Portside community. So Harbor Drive 2.0 is also included in that plan, and that was adopted in September 2022. And then to advance the ITS component of Harbor Drive, we've also completed the concept of operations, which is the document that begins to look at some of the specific technical requirements for the intelligent transportation system. And that was completed in August 2022. Next slide, please. Earlier this year, in June 2023, Sandag was awarded, along with Caltrans and Port, $18.5 million to continue the Harbor Drive 2.0 and Vesta Street Bridge projects, two related projects along Harbor Drive and over Harbor Drive with the Vesta Street Bridge with Naval Base San Diego. So that's ongoing, and we're also pursuing additional funding to continue advancing that project. Next slide, please. The next action is to increase the number of truck parking and staging facilities, including with electric vehicle charging capabilities nearby, as well as in the region. So next slide, please. And our SANDAG's role in this is to work with the cities, so National City and City of San Diego, as other cities in the region to identify allowable locations as well as different characteristics for how to develop these appropriately. So one of the components of the blueprint that I mentioned earlier is the siting criteria. So that's that study looked at zero emission charging infrastructure, both electric as well as hydrogen. And the siting criteria look at what the different site specific criteria should be, what it takes to develop a site, as well as the different things to consider in terms of equity, relationship to other land uses. So the siting criteria were completed as part of that. And so we'll be sharing that with the jurisdictions when the final study is wrapped up. We're also participating in a group that's led by Caltrans, and that's to develop zero emission vehicle charging and fueling station feasibility study. So that study will look at different sites within the Caltrans District 11, so San Diego and Imperial counties, to determine feasible sites and taking advantage of the siting criteria to evaluate those. Next slide, please. The next action is neighborhood resiliency and housing stability. So next slide, please. SANDAG is expected to develop a transportation and health equity study based on funding opportunities, and two reports that we've completed that are really in line with this role are the social equity baseline report, which was completed in April 2023, as well as the 2023 RTIP, Regional Transportation Improvement Program Social Equity Analysis. So the social equity baseline report is a really great document that looks at the demographic, community and health needs, access to opportunities all across the region. And it's a really important document for how we do our planning and based on data. And as well as the RTIP is the program of how we actually commit dollars to certain projects to build in the region for transportation projects. And so for the 2023 RTIP, we did a social equity analysis where we analyzed how all of those projects were being spent in the region, different areas in the community, and how those benefit equity, result in equity in different areas or not. And so that's an ongoing, we did it in this RTIP, and we plan to improve the methodology and continue doing that for future RTIPs. Next slide, please. The next action, the last one here, is to improve transportation efficiencies. So next slide, please. So with this, we plan to prioritize implementation of grade separations on the Blue Line trolley at 28th Street and 32nd Street. So grade separation is where there's generally a bridge built above or below. So right now we've got intersections at grade where the railroad crossing is in the same level as the roadway. So if one of those can be moved up or down, then that avoids conflict. And so the grade separations, both of those were included in the 2021 regional plan, as well as the South Bay to Sorrento comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. And so we're, because those projects are included in the plans, we're looking for funding to help advance those projects. And so we continue working on those. Next slide, please. And that concludes the updates that we have for progress in the last year. But certainly welcome any follow-up. My email is there on the bottom of the slide, tim.garrett@sandag.org. Welcome you to reach out for any clarifications after the meeting, and happy to take any questions after we do the next presentation. So I'll turn it back to Chewy. Thanks.
Hey, Tim, appreciate the speedy but clear presentation. Now I want to hand it over to our colleagues at Caltrans if they're still available. I have Jose Luis and Maggie as presenters.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Jose Luis Robles. I'm here to present the Harbor 2.0 Vista Bridge Port Access Improvement Project. It's been brought up several times this evening. And so I'm going to be talking about where the project is now, the status of the project, and what our next steps are going to be. Next slide. Pretty much the purpose and the objective of this presentation is to inform you folks, like I just mentioned, the current status of the project and next steps. Next slide. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the project. I'm just going to do a brief summary of what the project entails. Basically, right now the project there's two projects joined in one. The first project is the Vesta Bridge project. What is trying to accomplish is to connect the wet side of the naval base with the dry side of the naval base. On your screen, you can see the aqua-looking section that shows the west side of the Navy, and on the east side is the green side of the Navy. And what's happening currently? What's happening is when vehicles enter the Navy on the dry side, in order for them to get to the west side, they need to get out of the naval base, go into local streets, local roads, primarily impacting 32nd Street as it heads down to Harbor Drive, and it creates quite a bit of congestion in that area. So the goal of this project primarily is to eliminate the necessity for vehicles to use city streets, especially if they're mostly going from one side of the Navy to the other, and use the pedestrian, not the pedestrian, but the bridge itself, which will include pedestrian access as well as bicycle access. Then the second portion of the project is the Harbor 2.0 that was discussed earlier today, and that is going to implement or install truck-only lanes in the median along Harbor Drive from 10th Avenue Marine Terminal Station all the way to Civic Drive. There's some locations along Harbor Drive that are not wide enough to implement an additional lane in the median. So what we're going to be doing there is implementing truck-only lanes during off-peak hours. And that's where our ITS elements that was discussed by our standard group from the CONOPS is going to play an important role there on managing the traffic of freight. The project is also going to be incorporating priority signalization for freight, allowing for freight to move smoothly along the corridor. And this is going to help because when trucks tend to stand and stop signs and idle, that's where the most pollution occurs. Finally, the biggest goal, or what I consider what the improvement that this project is going to have, is that it's going to incentivize freight to use freight assigned local streets to access the freeways. Currently, the access points are to access the 5 is the 28th Street road that meets Harbor Drive, and 32nd Street to join the 15th interchange. This improvement is going to incentivize freight to continue to use those routes, and it's going to make it very difficult for them to use any other access or any other roads to access our freeways. Next slide. Okay. This is what I was talking about. So we'll just go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay. The current schedule. Actually, this is a little bit outdated. Right now we're in the environmental phase. The draft environmental document was released to the public in October 16th. We had a public meeting there at Cesar Chavez November 2nd. We received some comments. Comments from the public were due November 16th. Unfortunately, this presentation is past that date, and now we're going to be addressing the comments that we received. After that, we're going to be identify the preferred alternative. And this is for both projects put together, both Harbor Drive and Vesta. And the goal is to complete the environmental document before the end of this year. Let's go to the next slide. All right, this is basically the schedule that we were following for these two projects. After right now, we're in late November, early December. So our next goal is to get project approval, environmental document, which gives us the CEQA and the environmental assessment NEPA approval. so that we can move into the design phase. Once we get that approval, the projects are going to go separate ways. The Vesta Bridge portion of the project is going to stay in Caltrans, and the Harbor 2.0 project is going to move over to Sandag. We're going to be partnering with the port as well to make sure these projects move into the design and then finally into the construction. Right now, we currently are penciled in spring of 2024 for the beginning of design, and the construction is late 2029. Next slide, please. Okay, it was mentioned earlier about the grant money that we received in partnership with Sandag and the port. We received a total of $18.5 million of TCEP funds for both of these projects. This is a breakdown of what each project received for the TCEP and the matching funds that are going to be provided by the port for certain aspects of the project. The port is going to be matching for the Vesta right-of-way capital fund, which pays for any utility relocation that needs to occur for the Vesta Bridge, for example. If you look at the last row of the table, it says 1.9 regular match Port of San Diego. That's the portion that the Port of San Diego is going to contribute to the project for the right-of-way capital component. And they're also going to be providing $300,000 for the support, which is the soft cost of the right-of-way component. We've also been pursuing additional grants for the remaining of the funds. Currently, we're not funded for the harbor right-of-way component, and we're not funded for the construction of both projects. But we're working together with Sandag and the port to continue to seek funding for that. And we're going to be hopefully going to the next cycle, TCEP cycle, to be pursuing additional funds. All right, next slide. Okay, so there's been a lot of coordination that's been occurring. Just hearing this afternoon, all the efforts that everybody's going through. We've been trying to contact as many people as we can as we move along this project. And we've been coordinating with our projects that have been ongoing. Luckily for us, we have good partnerships with all these folks, the Sandag, City of San Diego, City of National City, with the Navy. So we've been connecting to see where we're at with all these projects that are listed on the sheet, and we're making sure we don't overlap with each other or conflict with each other. Upcoming key events, like I mentioned, the public period for commenting went by. I sent this slide presentation right in the middle of this period. The public meeting was held November 2nd, and we're hoping to conclude NED by December of this year. After that, we're going to be continue to working together in partnership with the Navy and with other agencies support, and that way we can begin in April 2024. Next slide. That's all I have, and thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach me. I can be contacted through Chuy Flores, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
I believe, Margarita, we have a few slides from you.
Yes. Hi. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to make mine short and sweet for the sake of time and everyone's evening. If we can go over to slide number 5, I think pictures always tell the best story. And I'll just give a quick summary of what we call our Clean California project. So if you can go to the construction slide, I think it's slide number 5. This one, yes, currently in construction. So just to give everyone a quick summary of our Clean California at Boston Avenue. Caltrans submitted a proposal to the state as part of the Clean California program with the goal of having Boston Avenue be one of these candidates that would help the community. The goal of the project is to help with the future Boston Avenue linear park. Si me oye o quiere que le puedo traducir, si necesita. El propósito de este proyecto para las personas que no entienden el inglés es plantear la plataforma para lo que va a ser un parque en el futuro para la comunidad de aquí de Logan, Barrio Logan y Logan Heights. One of the things, some of the things that we have proposed in the project, as you can see from these pictures, is we added a privacy wall. We did removal of 1 foot of contaminated soil and replaced it with the 1 foot of clean soil. We added an 8-foot section of a bike pedestrian pathway. And we're actually right now in coordination with the city and SDG&E and adding streetlights. A lot of these elements that I just mentioned were basically requests that we received in conversations during the whole project life with EHC, the Environmental Health Coalition. So those are things that we're working on. We're actually also, not as part of the original project, but as a contract change order, we're also adding a ramp and replacing the stairs that are in the pedestrian bridge and putting in a new ramp. Ahora en español, para las personas que necesitan traducción, porque yo sé que hay problemas con el sonido. Este proyecto estamos agregando un muro. Quitamos.
Margarita,
Go ahead. Sorry.
the interpretation's working, so you can go ahead.
Okay,
in
perfect.
English.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. And so all along with this project, we're also working in parallel with the city of San Diego on a relinquishment. So this project not only will help with the future Boston Park, but it's also helping us work through our efforts to make this land available to the city so that the park can become a reality for the community. And so the goal is to have the project done by spring of next year, 2024. And then the relinquishment, or the city will become the owners of this property, hopefully, if not in the summer, in the fall of next year. So that's just a quick recap. I hope that it made sense to everyone. And I'm very proud of this project. I've been working on it since day one, and it's finally coming to this point where it's making an impact as we speak right now. The area looks so much cleaner, and there's lighting now. There wasn't any lighting before, so if there's any questions, like everyone has mentioned before, please reach out to me through Chuy. And I just want to keep it nice and short and sweet for the purposes of time. So thank you for letting me share this project.
Much, Margarita and Jose. In an effort to respect folks' time, we're gonna go ahead and close out today's meeting, and we'll be following up with the meeting recording, presentation materials, and information on how to reach out for additional questions and comments to all our presenters today. As a reminder, there is no meeting in December in observance of the holidays. Our next meeting will take place on the 4th Tuesday of January, which is January 23. I will also be following up with the 2024 meeting calendar in a few weeks, so everyone's can start saving those dates for the next calendar year. Thank you again, everybody, for staying with us and staying engaged throughout this whole meeting. If anything comes up, feel free to reach out to me over email. But I'm wishing everyone a a good evening and a good night.
Thanks, Joey.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy
Happy
holidays.
holidays.
Thank you.
Buenas noches. Felices fiestas a todos.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Bye, buenas noches.
Good night, everyone, and please remember, happiness is a choice, even on a busy, bad day. God bless, and everyone have a smile during this troubled times that we know will turn out okay.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. I'm smiling.
All right.